Are you looking for details of the most beautiful weekend hikes in southeast Queensland and further afield? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Everyday Hiker podcast. My name is Beck and I'm your host. Join me and my guest hikers as we share amazing locations, practical tips and guides for new hikers, as well as those with more experience looking for some inspiration. And please, if you like what you hear, follow me, share with your friends, rate my podcast and send me your feedback. Hello everyone, and I am really excited today to have a special guest whose videos on YouTube I've been watching and thinking, wow, what an inspiring lady. Welcome to the Everyday Hiker podcast, Jenny Woodhouse.
Oh, good morning. It's lovely to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, it's fantastic. And I could talk to Jenny about so many hikes because her list of hikes she's done is just phenomenal. We were talking before and she told me she's an alpine hiker. She's done all of Mount Kosciuszko, about to commence a great adventure in Tasmania, which she's done many times as well. New Zealand. There are so many places we could talk about today with Jenny. But I did ask because I saw that Jenny had done a recent YouTube series on the Sunshine Coast Hinterland Great Walk. And I know that when people are asking, where's a great beginner overnight hike, that this comes up a lot, is to start with Sunshine Coast. So I thought I would ask Jenny today, who's done it so many times in so many variations, what the highlights are, how to do a long hike out of it, but also how to do some shorter overnight hikes. So Jenny, let's kick off with what's your preferred length of time to spend on this walk?
Well, it's a great walk that I prefer to use for my hike training with weighted backpack training in preparation for bigger adventures. So I tend to do it in a 4-day, the traditional 4-day way of doing it, but then a couple of weeks later I'll come back and do it as a 6-dayer, and that means that I just continue walking and then finally come back another week or so after that and do it as an 8-dayer, which is a double loop at a total of 160 kilometres all up.
Wow, that's some good training that you're putting in. So, and where do you start? Well, traditionally, where would you start?
I always start at Broome Pocket Dam.
Right, and there's good parking down there, but one of the things with this walk is you've got to do a little bit of car shuffling because there's not really... Actually, there is a bus, I think, that goes down to Broome Pocket Dam or nearby it, but what are you doing with your car then if you're starting out from Broome Pocket Dam?
Yes, in my situation, my husband very nicely drops me off and picks me up. So for me personally, I don't need to worry about the transport. However, I do understand that there's 2 taxi services that can also help you out with transport, but otherwise, yes, most people will hike it as a couple or in a small group, and yes, then they need to do a car shuffle before they start hiking.
Yeah, so generally people will leave a car at wherever they choose to end up, depending where they're jumping off. And one of the great things about this walk is there are towns along the way, so there are places that you can leave that second car, and then they're all driving back to Broome Pocket Dam, where there's really quite good parking and, you know, to get yourself sorted. So you've arrived at Broome Pocket Dam. What's day one look like?
Day one is just the most beautiful walk through glorious rainforest, usually fungi filled. You know, you're starting at Broome Pocket Dam, and then if I just bring my map up, you know, the first couple of areas that I really love are just looking at taking the time to wander down to the Narrows Lookout. There's a lovely little waterfall just near there, and you continue walking all along the trail. It's a very well formed trail, can be muddy and slippery, does have a lot of stairs, but you're following along the most beautiful natural creek that looks a bit like the creeks that you see up in North Queensland with Daintree National Park. So it has those gorgeous big granite boulders, and you're following that all along until you climb up the stairs to go to Condalilla Falls. And what I like to do is I just walk straight up to the day use area and have a good break there it's usually my second food break of the day. I will have had one somewhere along the creek section about halfway between Broome, Pocket Dam and Condalilla Day Use Area. So my second food break will be at Condalilla Day Use Area, and then I'll continue the walk, which is a little bit of road walking. I don't find it annoying at all because, let's face it, when you're doing a multi-dayer that involves going from town to town or through National Park, the reality is there will be road sections. So a little bit of a road section, I think it's only about 1.6 kilometres, and then you head back into the gorgeous rainforest and keep following that, having a look at the giant trees and once again fungi and listening to the bird song. It's utterly delightful until you get to Flaxton Walkers Camp.
And I might stop you there, Jenny, to say if we couldn't rush past Condalilla Falls because it really is the most awesome place to have a swim. It's a really deep pool. There's a waterfall at the end. There's no really obvious entry area. You have to kind of, slip your way down the side and into the water, but it's cool. So in summer, it's incredibly refreshing. So whether you go to the day use area and have lunch first, really, unless it's right in the middle of the winter, you'd be, missing out on something if you didn't have a dip in the pool there.
Yes, you would be. And what I usually do is I will have a bit of a break there, and before I head up to the day use area, I did omit that. I think you do need to be very careful, particularly if you're an older hiker getting in and out of the water, because it is very slippery. And the first time I hiked it, I did actually slip getting into the water and fell pretty heavily on my wrist. So I would warn hikers just to be, if you're older, to be really careful about getting into the water and out of the water. But yes, it is absolutely beautiful. And even if you don't want to go into the water, you can just sit there and watch everyone else while you're having a bit of a food and drink break. And there are very clear safety barriers around Condalilla Falls. And once again, I think it's very important to make sure you're staying within the safe area.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because there was a recent fatality around that area, and just somebody trying to get a bit further down the falls. And look, the safety barriers are there for a reason in that area. It is incredibly slippery, and I agree with you. It's hard to find that entry point in the pool and hard to sort of climb your way out, but it's worth the effort to do. There's also not too many places, particularly if it's busy, to have that rest break to eat. So I like that you mentioned going up to the day use area, because if that's your main goal, it's probably better to either eat before or afterwards and and do that in an area you can spread out in rather than around the pool.
Yes, and the reason I like doing that, if you're looking at the distance for the traditional day one, it is 16.1 kilometres. So that is a fairly decent hike with a lot of stairs and a bit of elevation gain, and it is traditionally a fairly tiring day, particularly if you're taking your time to wander and take photos and really enjoy it. You do get quite tired on that traditional day one. So when you ascend from Condalilla Falls and you get up to the day use area, you have to walk through that area anyway. And what I like to do is refill my water there from the toilet block, filtering it, and you have the toilets there, you have covered picnic areas, so it's a really lovely area to take a quick 15-20 minute major food break before you continue, because the effort to get to that point from Broome Pocket Dam is fairly substantial. The second half of the hike between the Condalilla day use area, walking the road walk and then into the forest and popping out to your designated camp that afternoon is a really easy walk. So yes, that's how I like to.
Yeah, it's a good place to have a good stop. And if you were doing a day walk in the area, this is probably the most popular one, isn't it?
Yes.
And there's a good car park at the Falls day use area as well. So if you were doing that shuttle. And then, of course, you're not too far away from a town if you wanted to, grab some food if you didn't want to carry all your food on the way. So you're hiking on from there, and your first night camp is going to be?
Flaxton Walkers Camp, and I really love that particular camp. I like to camp personally because I'm a solo hiker. I usually choose a campsite that's furthest away, and there's quite a few lovely ones where it's just all amongst the ferns. So Flaxton Walkers Camp visually just looks like a massive garden of giant bracken ferns and other sorts of ferns with towering trees, and it's an absolutely delightful camp. If I remember correctly, that might be the camp where they've put the lock boxes in for your food storage.
Right.
And there's I hope I'm not mixing that up because I haven't hiked this since last year, but when I hiked last year, there was only the one walkers camp where they had food, a big food lock box, which looks like a tradies lock box. And at each camp you have you have a good toilet, which is a long drop, but it always seems to be really clean. I always bring some toilet paper, but I haven't yet run out of toilet paper within the block anyway. And you have water, of which it's recommended you filter. So apart from rubbish bins on the Sunshine Coast Hinterland Great Walk, like a lot of multi-day walks, you need to pack all your rubbish out, but you have all the basics that you have. The only thing that I would add, if there was one little tweak that I could make to this absolutely fabulous multi-day walk, it would be really lovely in the ultimate case scenario for them to build an undercover area, just a minimum little pergola, because there have been so many times where I've been hiking it in appalling weather conditions with torrential rain, and for me, I'm not comfortable cooking in my tent. It's kind of a mobility thing as I'm older, and so in those situations sometimes I've had to cook underneath the shelter of the toilet block, which isn't ideal. So that would be the only tweak I would make to the campgrounds. Each of them are absolutely beautiful.
So soft ground then with your tent, like easy to pitch the tent, and if you're looking for a little bit of comfort, you're going to have to, by the sounds of things, bring your own chairs. There's not any picnic shelters there that you can prepare food or sit outside at night.
Well, each campground, each walkers camp does have a lovely platform. Mm-hmm. So you pitch your tent on the ground, and then you have a platform where you can sit and prepare food, and I like to have a fragrant bath on the trail as well. But it's just when it rains, and being in a rainforest, it does rain, it would be lovely to have a little basic pergola type structure where you could cook out of the rain. I'm being picky, but that would be my one tweak.
But we are talking the hinterland and a bit of rainforest, so rain isn't something that's unusual in the area.
Absolutely.
All right. So next morning, where are you heading to from there?
So day 2, I'm walking from Ubergee Walkers Camp to Flaxton Walkers Camp to Ubergee Walkers Camp. It's 13.1 kilometres. Once again, each day is graded officially grade 3 and 4, and I definitely agree with those grades. And this is an absolutely delightful day. It's one of my absolutely most preferred days because you're hiking down to Baxter Creek Falls, and that is phenomenally spectacular. You have an incredible suspension bridge, and when you're approaching it from the Flaxton Walkers campsite, you have these giant tree ferns right at the beginning, right at the edge of the suspension bridge, and you cross the suspension bridge. And if you want to go and see the waterfall, and you'd be mad not to, you do that before you cross the suspension bridge. And if you're hiking early morning, the bird song, the sulphur-breasted cockatoos, black cockatoos, the bird song is absolutely spectacular as you're hiking down from Flaxton Walkers Camp. It's quite steep, but it's a well-formed trail. Once again, you need to be very careful around the waterfall, Baxter Creek Falls, very similar to Condalilla in that it's slippery. I love to have a food break there, drink break, and spend some time filming and on photography, and then you walk across the suspension bridge, and then the exit up to the road is very, very steep. It's gradual, but if you're a hiker that's who is fairly new to hiking, and perhaps this might be your first multi-dayer, a lot of hikers comment that yes, that hill up to the road from the waterfall, from Baxter Creek Falls, does go on for a while, but it zigzags all the way up the hill, so you can stop wherever you want, have a look at the giant fallen trees with the moss all over them, and once again the fungi, and yes, then head up to the road, and then you have once again some road walking, which doesn't go on for long before you enter back into the rainforest, and you make your way towards Ubergee Walkers Camp.
And that's a lot quieter, that leg, isn't it, than day one? Day one's going to be a day walk. There are going to be people just going to the Condalilla Falls. Day two is going to be quieter. So as you said, you can take your time, around the falls and on that steep path up. And do you use hiking poles, Jenny?
Yes, I do, because studies have shown that they transfer about 1/3 or 30% of your upper body of your body weight from your lower body, so it helps relieve discomfort in your lower back, hips, knees and ankles, and it transfers it up through the upper body and helps support your lower body. So I don't hike anywhere without hiking poles. I use them every day, all day, 5 days a week on every hike, and that's definitely a recommendation that I would suggest is very worthwhile if you're managing any sort of medical issues, any sort of joint or hip or any sort of discomfort in that area. If you're older, they're absolutely tremendous in supporting that backpack weight on top.
And that's what I'm just thinking, because climbing up out of the Baxter Falls, the poles are just really, really helpful, because like you said, it's kind of gradual and zigzag, but it still requires a bit of effort to lift yourself up over some of the steps on the way up, doesn't it? So,
yes, it does.
And it can be muddy, depending on how much rain we've had. So that's the other thing that hiking poles can help with, testing the depth on the track before you have to step your boot into it. So,
but also stabilising you as you're walking through those muddy bits, trying to stay on the trail and not walk around the edges or anything like that. So to do that when you're walking through the thick, squelchy mud, which I really enjoy, but smaller footsteps placed closely together, and then using your hiking poles is how I choose to negotiate that sort of environment. And the poles are very, very helpful for stabilisation, absolutely.
Yeah. So you're at Ubergee Walkers Camp for night 2. Similar sort of setup as Flaxton's?
Yes, so lots of ground, not overly level to camp on, I must say. Once again, I choose a spot towards the back. So level ground can be a bit of an issue at that one, but generally speaking, you can work around that. Personally, I like to have my head higher, and I'm quite happy to have it sloping down a little bit towards my feet. When I'm setting up my tent, I tend to lay the ground sheet out and have a bit of a lie down on it first, just to check that I'm happy with that before I put the tent up. So I might fiddle around with that. And once again, you have the platform with each campsite to lay all your gear out and cook on. Once again, toilet block, water, yes, everything's provided. And at that campsite you have an absolutely glorious sunset viewing platform. So at golden hour I tend to take all my dinner down there. Mm-hmm. And I might have happy hour down there, but I definitely have dinner down there as well. Rehydrate, admire those absolutely incredible views. You're looking from Ubergee Walkers Camp out directly across to Thilberthalba Camp, so you're seeing where you're going to be hiking the next day, and the views through the valley there and having the mountains all around you is really a special spot. It's the only one that has, well, it's the best viewing platform. There's also a viewing platform at Thilberthalba Camp, but I personally prefer the one at Ubergee Walkers Camp.
Okay, so that's a great tip. So At this point, if you just wanted to do your first overnight hike in the area, this is probably going to be one of the picks that you've come up from Baroon Pocket Dam, you've stayed at Flaxton, there is just a short walk really from the road into Ubergee. So if you didn't want to stay the second night, you could go in, get your sunset view, have a break, and then walk back out to the car, because you can park on the verges of the road there. That's a place that you could leave your second car if you just wanted to do an overnight.
Absolutely, that's a good point actually, because there are a number of places where you can leave your car or get picked up. I personally prefer to get picked up at Leafy Lane car park at the trailhead there, which is right near there. It's a very quick entry in, so that's an alternate place to be picked up, because that brings us on to day 3 and 4 if you want to, or if you wanted to not do choose day 1 and 2 to hike. Commonly people like to do the big loop, which is day 3 and 4, and in that case you would start at Leafy Lane, and I prefer to walk that loop clockwise, because once you leave Thilba Walkers Camp, you're going down all the stairs at the beginning of the day, walking through incredible scribbly gum forest and beautiful grass trees with all the xantharias, and you're going down the stairs and heading into the rainforest before walking out. So some people prefer to walk the loop counterclockwise. Personally, I don't enjoy doing all of those stairs right up to Mount Thilba, where the walkers' camp is at the end of the day.
Yes, okay, that's a good point. So, and really, you're only about 15 minutes away from Montville at this stage, so it's pretty easy to get someone to come and pick you up or drop you off, and whether they're staying at Montville or whatever it may be, it's really not too far, like I said, from some of those big towns in the hinterland. So, okay, we've woken up at Ubergee and we're heading to Thilba. What's the trail like that day?
Oh, it's absolutely beautiful. The first part, a little bit like the day before, you get to walk down to another spectacular waterfall, and that's Jurella Falls, and it's gorgeous. You know, both of the waterfalls, or we have the 3 all up, I guess, but the third one's really pretty as well. It doesn't have the features of the suspension bridge like you had at Baxter's Creek Falls, but it is absolutely beautiful and well worth stopping there. And you do that very early in the day, and then you continue. It's rainforest walking, a little bit of road walking. I suppose the main feature of that day is the waterfall, but then also once you get up onto the escarpment, which is my other most favourite part of the trail, you're walking very close to the cliff edges, and the vegetation up there just changes completely. You have a lot of banksias, you have all of the grass trees, you have the scribbly gums. It's a completely different feel from the rainforest that you would have encountered on day 1 and 2.
And the walkers' camp, is it drier? Is it a bit more out of the rainforest?
Yes, it's right up on the edge of the escarpment. So there's a heap of camp spots to choose from. If it's windy, you might choose the ones furthest back, which are quite a walk away from the escarpment edge. I, on every occasion, have chosen the sites right on the edge of the escarpment. Once again, there's a viewing platform there. This time it's made out of stone, has delightful views over the Mary Valley below, and has the same facilities as the others. You know, the platform to lay your gear out. Once again, it can be a bit challenging finding level ground. The main challenge with Thilba Walkers Camp is getting tent pegs into the ground, because it's very rocky, very dry, and usually most hikers choose to use, instead of tent pegs, they'll use the little rock and big rock system of attaching your tent to the ground and weighting it down, rather than trying to get tent pegs in, because even if you were to try and put water on the ground and let that soak in before you get your tent pegs in, it's really, really challenging. So I usually just use rocks to attach to my guy lines in order to attach the tent to the ground for that one. So that's the only real challenge. It is very dry up there, completely different environment.
And I imagine because it's an escarpment, it could get windy too. So that's a great tip if you're camping overnight. There is you're going to have to think about the right method to secure your tent because you'll need to if it's a windy night as well and hard ground. So and there's plenty of YouTube videos on the best way to do that. So something to do your homework on.
Yes, absolutely.
So day 4, like you said, you're heading down.
Yes, so I'm walking from Filbert Alba Walkers Camp, and I would be walking that loop clockwise, continuing going. I like to start really early in the morning, either just in the dark or as it's turning to day, because the views with the golden light as it filters through the scribbly gum forest with the white trunks and the trees, it's just really a majestic walk, and the wildflowers are particularly good in that area, being drier. You know, it's amazing the environment that wildflowers choose to grow in. It's always poor soils, and so you'll see a really diverse array of wildflowers through the section from Filbert Alba's Walkers Camp as you descend down the stairs. And once again, you'll have the grass trees and the golden light that comes through those grass trees as you continue to descend. If you're walking that early in the morning, is just magical. And then when you get down to the bottom, you'll reach Girella Creek. So you'll be walking along the creek for quite a while. This is more of a challenging day, once again, walking-wise. It's still graded 3 and 4, but you have 5 creek crossings to do on this day. Now, there's only one of them where you're actually walking in the creek bed. All of the other have little easements for you to walk over, or bridges, depending on the water flow. So it's very rare that you'll get your feet wet. But there is one creek crossing where it may only be a dry creek bed, but it does go on for a little while, and you do have to spend a little bit of time trying to work out where you exit that creek. You can't possibly get lost in that section, but the track, it's the one area on the whole 4 days that isn't clearly defined, just for a little bit in that natural creek crossing where you're walking on a creek bed, and then you're walking, once again, you're through the rainforest, crisscrossing the creek back and forth. Lots of lovely places to stop and have a bit of a dip in the water, have a bit of a food break, get some more energy into your body, because when you start ascending out of the creek area up through the rainforest, once again, there's a little bit of elevation to gain there, and so some people will find that a bit tiring.
And so I forgot to ask, day 3 and day 4, what sort of kilometre range have we got there? I'll give you a moment to look at that.
So day 3 is 13.1 kilometres, so that's a really easy day. Day 4 is 16.7, so it's similar to day 1. So day 1 and day 4 are the hardest days if you're choosing to do that second half with the loop, walking it clockwise. And as I said, when I'm finishing, I'm commonly exiting at the Leafy Lane trailhead. So that's where I like to exit there.
Okay, and so that's the traditional 4 days from end to end. So Baroon Pocket Dam and, as you're saying, to the Leafy Lane car parking area.
Which is situated, the closest town to Leafy Lane trailhead, or that exit area, is Mapleton. A lot of people will choose to go to the pub after that for a bit of a lunch or a bit of a dinner. But
a bit of a celebration. Yes. It sounds to me like they're quite different. Day 1 and 2 is a bit different to day 3 and 4.
Yes, they're completely different. The first 2 days, you really are immersed in the beautiful rainforest. And on day 1, the last time I walked it with a girlfriend, we actually saw a koala, and he was right on the trail and climbed up a tree, right next to the trail. We had to give him some space and walk around him. So those first 2 days are very much all about the rainforest, and the second 2 days are very different. They're in much drier areas for the most part, and you have the escarpment walking up to the escarpment along the ridgeline, along the top of the escarpment, and then down through the hills until you reach the rainforest. And then you have a little bit of rainforest in the end, but you have all of the beautiful tall Sydney blue gums, so they're the really tall ones with the white trunks, and they tower over you, and it's absolutely beautiful. But yes, day 1 and 2 rainforest, day 3 and 4 is gum trees and escarpment and banksias, and completely different, drier environment.
So it's quite possible to do these as 2 completely separate walks.
Yes.
But you're going to need a good full 4 days if you want to do it end to end, about that 80k mark, isn't it?
Yes,
with all of them in total.
Yes, so you would carry 4 days of food. Work out, you might have had breakfast before you start on day 1, so you don't have to carry that, and you might finish at lunchtime on day 4, depending on your hiking skills and when you leave. So you might not have to carry all the food components for the 4 days, but just remembering that there's opportunities to capture water and filter it at each of the walkers' camp. I also tend to capture the water from the creeks if I feel that I want to do that. Once again, I filter it. You can also use the water purification tablets. So there's not really the need to carry a lot of water each day, because there's multiple opportunities every single day to capture and filter
to top
water.
up your water.
Yes.
Fantastic. And I guess if you wanted to add a little bit of extra walking, there are those towns that you're passing by within sort of a couple of kilometres that if, mid-afternoon, if you really didn't want to carry too much food, you could pop out into a town and a pub to get some food and get back on the trail. It is a little bit off the track, but it's not totally out of the question.
Yes, I would say the best opportunity to do that would be as you're on day 1, when you're passing through Condalilla and coming out there are a number of Airbnbs, there is a restaurant there, so you could choose to do sort of glamping. I suppose you could choose to have paid accommodation if you wanted for one of the nights of the 4. If you were doing a 4-day section, I do know some hikers do tend to do that. If it's a special girlfriend's trip and birthdays or whatever, you can do that. And likewise, Mapleton on day 3, 4, you also have that opportunity if you so desire.
Yeah, okay, that's great. So, but mostly you're going to be carrying in food for 4 days or
Yes.
2 days, whichever one you choose. Water's taken care of. What's, from a safety perspective, what's the access like with your mobile phone? Are you worried about communication, or is the signal fairly good all the way?
No, it's one of the walks where the signal is very reliable for numerous points on every single day. So in my situation, I have 4 safety contacts who track my progress every single day. I write a hike plan before I start every single hike, and that's communicated and have edited maps and all of that sort of thing. So my safety contacts receive my hike plan with the maps. They know exactly what routes I'm using. I always hike with a PLB GPS tracker, and in my case I have a Spot device Gen 4. I have my mobile phone, and that has satellite SOS functioning now, where with the Apple phones you can send a satellite message, but you can also communicate directly with emergency services. Say if you had a significant fall, got concussion or broke a leg, using the satellite method on your phone is actually a really great way to communicate with the SES or the emergency services. And the reason for that is all of your safety contacts that are nominated on your phone, they see exactly all of the communication that you have with emergency services. So emergency services will ask you a number of questions and you will answer them, and your safety contacts receive exactly that, so they know exactly what's happening. So safety wise, I choose to check in numerous times each day. I talk a little bit about how I'm finding it, whether I'm getting tired, and there's a number of reasons why I personally choose to do that. So I'm very much a safety girl first. type of hiker. I'm a solo hiker. I tend to hike about 95% of my time solo, so I think covering your safety is really important. And there are a lot of stairs, particularly in day 1 and 2, and then on that 4th day as you're descending from Gilberthalba, thank you, down. There's a lot of stairs, and if you're choosing to, or if you've booked campsites and you have to book campsites, I should say, but if your dates that you've selected coincide with really poor weather, the track will be notoriously muddy and very, very slippery. And so in those situations, I definitely will slow my pace considerably. I'll be using my hiking poles and be very careful with my foot placement to try and minimise any risk of injury.
Yeah, I'm glad you reminded us of the SOS function, because we talked about it on the Mount Barney episode, and it's something that everybody should spend, if they're hiking solo or they're just hiking in more remote areas, just get that set up so that you understand how it works, because it's a really, really good function that we've got now. For our safety. Now, let's talk about, we're running out of time, but I'm just going to quickly ask you, we talked about shoes before. You said you're walking straight through the creeks, you don't bother taking them off,
no.
And, just dry socks.
Yes, so I carry 3 pairs of socks, so one for the first day of hiking, and yes, I wear trainers, that's my preferred shoe, and so I will walk straight through the creeks, don't worry about getting my shoes muddy, wet, whatever, and then at night I'll take the socks off, I'll give them a quick rinse out, and I have a pair of camp socks, and then I have a new pair of socks for the second day, and that on the second day, my first day socks will be hopefully drying, and so that's how I choose to manage my socks and shoes. And part of my foot care routine, I think it's really important to wash your feet carefully at the end of each hiking day, and it's usually the salt that builds up in your shoes and the moisture that causes the blisters, so that once again, that's why I choose to wash my socks out, to remove the salt content there.
And the other reason for that is because, let's face it, there's leeches on this track. So you want to take particular care of your feet to identify any leeches, not let them sit there overnight and feast on your blood.
Absolutely. There's different things you can do about that. I tend to use toe socks, and then I might have a second pair over the top, depending on how much rain we've had and how many, what the leech situation's going to be like. But I always do use an insect repellent, either Bushman's or Rid, and I'm not spraying it on my skin, I'm spraying it over my shoes and socks and the lower part of my hiking pants, and I choose to wear full length trousers and also a long sleeve shirt for sun protection as well, but it also, on the bottom half, it also helps with the leeches. And then gaiters, I use little either Dirty Girl gaiters or Ultra Trail Runners gaiters, just the little ones that cover your ankles. I don't feel like you need the longer ones up to your knees at all. It's not muddy like Tasmania mud, but yes, just having different layers of protection from the leeches is a very good strategy.
All right, that's fantastic. Jenny, we're going to wrap up with the one spot on the trail that you're standing and you're thinking, this is what it's all about. This is the view that I've come for. I suspect I know from your comments earlier, but I'll leave it up to you to say what's your favourite view.
Yes, my favourite part is definitely Baxter Creek Falls. It's the combination of the suspension bridge and the view you get as you're walking down to the suspension bridge with the big tree ferns, but also looking out onto the creek as you're crossing it, and then you have the falls just before that. That's my personal favourite. Number one, can't miss that little bit. Absolutely.
All right, that's fantastic. Jenny, I really appreciate your time today because you're so busy hiking and going so many places, but to share your experiences is really appreciated. As like I said, it's a trail that I think that is a great one for everyone to test out an overnight camp and just a beautiful one right in our backyard. So thank you for the time, and I look forward to speaking to you in future episodes.
Yes, thank you. It's been absolutely wonderful. Have a great day, everyone, and happy hiking.